telling me that one nifty thing I had never known about Google Drive, but I discovered later at Google I/O, actually last week, I don't know if any of you were there, is that...
Couldn't get tickets.
Yeah, of course you couldn't. Just, is that I can be told, or I can find out that certain pictures contain the Eiffel Tower or other specific entities that Google can recognize. Can you tell me how it is that happens?
Sure. So there's actually was originally its own little app called Google Goggles, which was a bunch of other technologies that Google had put together, which people know as OCR, which is really looking at characters, optical character recognition. So if I scan, a document in, I can look at it, figure out what the words are. It's kind of an extension of that to do machine learning to figure out what objects are. And so the idea is that you can take a picture of an elephant, not call it an elephant in the file name or anything like that, and then it's in your files, and when you search for elephant, it'll show up because we're able to recognize this is an elephant. It should match this word and produce it there. And so that's, I think, coming back to where we started. When we talk about storage and where things are going from a cost and technology perspective. But to me, the really interesting thing is what we can then do with all that information. And that's where things like goggles, things like Google Now, which is our kind of suggestion technology, really start to take what used to be just your information that would just sit on your hard drive or sit on your phone and just kind of lie there, and really start to have an impact on your day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right. I think that goes back to sort of the data center is more than just about storage, right? It's about processing. Right? When you get these images up and you need to do this sort of, recognition of patterns and so forth, you need to have strong processing power in the data center as well. So I think the complexity in the data center is becoming, exponentially, larger. And that's, I think, something that we all deal with. And then going back to the comment about the storage devices we use in there, right? I think, it's a lot more than just the storage devices. It's also the processing, it's the virtualization strategy we use. It's the location of data centers. Like, for instance, we do a lot of work with telcos, right? I mean, they are the people that operate the networks, and whether people like it or not, operators actually have an opinion about what we throw through their pipe, right? Because they're the one having to build all these networks and so forth, and while it's great some people upload 100 gigs, these people have to run a business on the other side of it. But what these guys also want is they also care about where the data is stored, right? I mean, a lot of people around the world don't actually trust America. They want the data to be stored locally.
You mean like the press?
Right. You go to Canada, and talk to Canadian businesses, and they're like, "Is my data stored in the U.S.? Are you kidding me? Patriot Act? Is the FBI going to have access to the data?" I mean, there is a lot of concerns there. I mean, like we're today working with a very large operator in Switzerland. Do you think the Swiss want that data in the U.S.? Did the Swiss ever want anything out of Switzerland? No, they didn't. So I think that's another sort of dimension and consideration as we look at all these things in the cloud. It's like people are beginning to ask a lot more questions about what exactly is this thing where I'm putting my data.
But actually, as a consumer, I don't care where my data is. All I care about is that when I pick my phone up, it's there. If I go to my desktop, it's there. If I go to my television, it's there. And I think what we're doing as companies is that we're trying to figure out ways to remove the complexity. And number one, trying to find out where it is. And number two, just look at it and enjoy it. I mean, that's what our goal is as a company. How many people in here really know what a gigabyte is?
Well, wrong audience, but
consumer.
I agree.
No one cares. Do you
agree,
care?
Tony.
You have so many,
but I don't
and then
think
you
they
run
know
out.
what. I don't even think they know what the cloud is. Like that's one of the things we learned from Kickstarter is like people are like, the cloud? What is the cloud? I mean, it's a very specific, technology industry term. I've often heard it as the greatest story ever told, right? I mean, when we explained to Grandma and Grandpa what the internet was, we drew a terminal and then a little arrow and then the internet. Okay, well, we'll just do this little circle, this little cloud thing, and then another terminal here, and we're like, well, what's happening is it goes into this terminal. I think when it comes to a branding perspective for the cloud, the greatest future branding perspective will be that the cloud doesn't actually exist anymore. Like it's not being used anymore. It's that people just assume, hey, my data is available to me, and sure, the engineers and the marketing people will still call it the cloud, but the average person will use it. And we did some Google. If you've ever used Google surveys, you absolutely should try it out. If you haven't, It's phenomenal. They've got a great system there. We did surveys on trying to find out what people recognized when it came to the word cloud and what services they used. And it was amazing that what I consider the worst service in the industry is the most recognized one, and that's iCloud. Everybody in the surveys were saying, I use iCloud. And then you ask them like how many, where their photos go, and they say Flickr. Or they say, Google Plus, they say something else. They never say iCloud. Like they'll know they have it, but they don't know actually how to use it. And I think the best thing that we can do is just make it ubiquitous. Make the experience available wherever you are. The stuff that they're doing with photo recognition. I just texted my co-founder because we were playing with it the other day, and what's going on? This is just crazy. And yeah, photo recognition is just awesome. And I think there's even more stuff to be had if it's used wisely and done. On the comment of compute power, most data centers, you rack a server with 4 cores and like 24 or some number of hard drives. We think that we're doing something interesting where we actually have a CPU per disk. And you have a lot of unutilized CPU that could be harnessed for DNA sequencing. You could use it for a whole bunch of other stuff. And to have a CPU per disk could be really cool when you have millions of disks out there with running this distributed system. So on that point, I think there's a lot that can be done in anybody's data center as well as in the distributed system.
The one thing I hate more than my daughter coming by and knocking over my 1 terabyte drive is her knocking over my 60 terabyte drive. Right? I just don't want this stuff at my house. I just want to have it. I just want to access it because I gotta go to work. I don't want to think about this stuff. I'm dumb, right? I don't have time for this. That's our goal in our company, is to make it so that you don't have to think about this anymore. It just doesn't matter.
Yeah, but I think Clint has an answer for that. What's your answer? How is the peer network working?
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree. I mean, we recognize that there's a friction to having to get a Space Monkey device, but once you've proven that a distributed system like this can work across millions of users, there are already devices in people's homes that could be enabled with this type of system, like a set-top box. Lots of home devices that could be running Space Monkey in the background, and your data essentially is black matter. Once it's encrypted and encoded and it's distributed across thousands of devices, which is already what happens when it goes to Google or Amazon. It's broken up and sent into many places, or it's copied and sent into many places. Data becomes essentially this black matter. As long as I have the ability to access it, there are so many devices that could be enabled to do more for you. Better access, better photo recognition, better sharing, better real-time information. Lots of things that could be done. Along those lines. So I think the data center is definitely going to be there, but there's going to be a lot of other things out there, devices out there doing similar tasks for you without you needing to ask for it.
I think a lot of this discussion, I think it's important to separate sort of consumer versus business, right? I think you're right about the cloud. A lot of people don't understand what it is, and for a lot of people working in the IT department in a company, they actually hate cloud, anything cloud, right? Because ultimately it means that they're going to get off control. And they're going to figure out who to trust. And this is where, at Soonr, we deal a lot with the CIOs, the IT admins, and so forth. That are sort of like, can we trust this thing? And what happens now? And all that, right? And I think in an ideal world, they would not choose the cloud, right? But what's driving the cloud adoption are things like, this is a business school we read today, right? So a lot of you guys probably understand this, is that a lot of companies do not want to have a big IT budget. They don't want to have a lot of IT personnel. They want to slim down. A lot of you guys are going to start businesses where you're not going to hire IT people for quite some time. So IT people is not really being valued the way they used to be, right? So I think that's one thing that I think is important for business, and that's why these things about security and privacy and so forth is so important for businesses and why they want to pay. I think the other thing is just, we're living in a world where people, we talk about these devices and that out there, right? It's not one, company that's going to dominate that, right? We have BYOD, out there where people are picking their own devices. I mean, Google is obviously very active with Android. Today I was at a Samsung event. They're developing their own strategic operating system called Tyson, apparently. There's iOS, there's Microsoft, and all that, right? And the world is a world where there's a lot of mix and match going on. And I think why this conversation is interesting is because the only thing that is for sure is that the data is the ultimate thing that matters, right? I mean, whatever phone I use doesn't matter. I mean, today I use iOS, tomorrow I don't use Android or whatever, but it's my data. I want my pictures, I want my presentations and all that. And as I'm a consumer, I would rather not pay for it. I just want it to work. I want it unlimited and so forth, right? I'm a business person. I care. I want to retain versions. I want to be HIPAA compliant. Don't want to have my patient's information if I'm a doctor, out on Facebook and things like that.
Consumer spend.
It can.
Okay.
Yeah, and
so
there are different ways, right? There are different business models. I mean, there's advertising. There's a lot of other things.
just
There are
charge
ways you can monetize it, right?
let's just open it up to the audience. Okay.
So you talked about Google Glasses, and Google Glass is going to be storing a lot of data. So what is Google's strategy in storing that amount of data?
So I think glass is one example. I think there are a lot of other devices. I mentioned before, like the Nest, right? This is this little thermostat that is a little computer that actually adjusts your the temperature in your house and knows when you're gone and turns it down, turns it up, and that's constantly generating data. And there's going to be tons of devices, right? So I think kind of haven't talked about it all, but Google has this storage system, this network, to handle any scale of data. I mean, Google started indexing the internet every day, and there's a lot of data there. So to us, it's less about the amount of data and really making sure it can be useful, it can be accessible, and it can be valuable for you, whatever that application is going to be.
The reason I asked this question is today you're looking at $200, $300 a year cost at an enterprise level to store data in the cloud. I mean, obviously that's going down, but something like what Tony's company is doing and versus what Google is going to, amount of data that will be generated, how are you going to replace that cost or no cost with additional revenues? You talked about some value-added services. I mean, how are you going to build that? What kind of value are you going to build for a consumer?
So a typical example is that you probably buy a Microsoft Office license today.
Right.
You pay something for that every month. And so editing, that's a service, editing files, right? And so if you say, storage is free, but you pay $2 a month for editing your files, that's the way you sort of pay for that storage. Faxing, you may have a fax machine today. Tomorrow you're not going to have a fax machine, you're going to do that through the cloud. There's a lot of value-adding services like that I think are going to kind of make the cloud question go away, or the storage question go away. Storage will ultimately be something that comes with things. You're going to get plenty of it. This whole business of buying, what you guys did with Mozi was right on, right? Don't worry about storage. Storage, you should not have to sit there and be like, do I need to buy 2 more gigabytes and all that? You shouldn't be in that business really, right? It's about the experience, it's about what you do for people. And I think here we all think there are many different ways we can do that.
I think one of the other comments too is that there's nobody from the backup world on this panel. I think backup is dead. Whether it's an automatic upload from Google Plus or automatic uploads from SpaceMonkey or anybody else, or what Soonr's doing, like backup is dead. Like if you're in the backup business, Captain, on the consumer side, and I even think eventually on the business side, like his whole job is to take consumer technology and move it into the enterprise. I think it'll happen at the consumer level, it'll happen at the enterprise level, where redundant systems exist, and why do you need to back up? Captain Picard never had to back up his stuff. Did you ever see that in Star Trek? It wasn't like, hey, here are the captain log notes. Oh, please run backup. No, he never did that. He didn't have to do that. Why do we do that? Why do we store something, hit the save button, and then wait for Mozi to start, or Carbonite, or somebody else? That's crazy. It's going away. Backup's done.
Enterprise backup data is growing at 30 to 40%.
Sure,
because they're crazy. They don't want to be like Captain Picard. They're stupid.
Well, that's also because the amount of data is growing even more exponentially, so that's going there. But I think
I would argue on that premise. I think per individual worker versus the individual consumer, the consumer creates way more larger sets of data in the sense of like photos and videos. But I think you're right. As a collective, as a company, it is, you're totally right. It's growing like crazy. Like it's storing a lot of stuff.
I mean, I think enterprise, you can get to medical and
Yeah,
tons of
that's
information,
true. There's other information there.
I think
too.
to the backup point, like, so Google Apps, right? This is our alternative to the Microsoft world where you're doing everything locally on a machine. Is that it's all done, it's automatically backed up. So to your point, you don't save anything. You don't have to nightly go make your backup and bring it to the other location in case there's a fire. It's built into the infrastructure. So every time you type a button, it's getting saved to a bunch of different places at once. And so, yes, there's more data, but because it's operating at such a scale, that the actual cost of doing it really isn't too bad.